Are you Avi? Who's Avivant entered the waiting
That's
room?
me.
Is that you? Okay, so do you mind if I test and then make you a co-host? Okay. Oh,
Hello, everyone. My name is Joy Ellison. I'm a professor here at URI in the Gender and Women's Studies Department. And it is my honor and a very sincere pleasure to get to introduce to you Mev Miller. I've got a wonderful bio to read to you. But I'd like to first say, if I can, that Mev is doing some incredibly important work in our community that is of tremendous historical significance and significance to me personally. And I thank you all for being here. So without further ado, Mev Miller is the founder and the instigator lesbrarian of Wonderground Lesbian Archive and Library. She has been a lesbian for all her life and out for more than 50 years. Prior to 1982, Mev aspired to be a Roman Catholic nun or priest and received a master's degree in religious studies while working as a campus minister at a Jesuit university in the late 70s. As a political act, she then went to seminary to earn a master's of divinity and focused on liberation theology. Before graduation, she came out as a lesbian and as a feminist and a Wiccan. As a result, Mev has been a lesbian feminist cultural worker since the early 80s. She was involved in the women in print movement in various positions in wholesaling, bookselling, editing, writing, publishing, marketing, reviewing, and also collaborating with librarians and educators. She worked as a book buyer at Amazon Feminist Bookstore, not Amazon.com, in Minneapolis, Minnesota for nearly 10 years. She's been a lesbian feminist street activist, a writer, a DJ for a lesbian radio show, and a purveyor of various lesbian community activities in multiple states and venues. After receiving a PhD in education and curriculum instruction and critical pedagogy, Mev founded We Learn, Women Expanding Literacy Education Action Resource Network in 1993. We Learn supports women in adult basic education and literacy and provides access to learning materials centered on women's issues. She was executive director until 2013. She's also worked in adult basic education, providing professional development to instructors and teaching adult students in various basic learning settings. The COVID years forced her into what she claims is a professional retirement. Um, but Mev now spends much of her time focusing on nurturing and developing the Wonderground Lesbian Archive and Library. Please join me in welcoming Mev Miller.
Thank you very much. I hope this will work. I don't need an extra thing in my hands. Does that work? You hear me okay? Okay. So, thank you for that introduction. And I'm going to I don't usually like to read script too much, but I'm going to today because if I don't, you'll be here all night. So, and I have to remember to change this. So just a little bit about me other than what has already been said. I think it's really important for historical context for you to know that I am 70 years old. I was a tomboy. Well, I still am a tomboy. Now I'm a fully grown lesbian, as it says on the button. I've been in various positions. Do you know what the women in print movement is? Yeah, okay. So basically it was feminist lesbian publishers, writers, booksellers, distributors, who between the 70s, 1970s to about 2000 were publishing lesbian and feminist books. They created a network, an ecosystem, if you will, promoting lesbian and feminist books through bookstores and so on and so forth. So a very vibrant activity and one that I was part of for 25 plus years. So the other thing is that because of that, and just because I am who I am, I've been a collector of all things lesbian for about 45 plus years. So you can imagine, you know, my partner's like, really? Do you really need to do that? I forgot to mention, we've been together for 37 years, so she's put up with a lot. And even though she's not here, she's heard this Dog and Pony Show before. So I would like to introduce Wonderground Lesbian Archive. We were incorporated in 2022. So as far as lesbian archives go, we're the new kid on the block. And we opened our current location in Cranston in May of 2024. So we've been there almost 2 years now. And much of the archive at that time, when we first moved, I would say about 95% of it was my own stuff that I'd been collecting, which was pretty enormous. Now, 2 years in, as more people donate stuff, I would say maybe only about 80% of it is initially from my personal collection. So I want to talk a little bit about the power of naming. As a feminist and lesbian activist, I'm keenly aware that the power to name who we are remains critical and essential to the work that we do. I struggled with naming the archive. I was coming up with things like Amazon Room, Sappho's Corner, things like that. And finally, a friend of mine said, do you remember the book Wonderground? I was like, oh, yeah. I had to go back and read it because it'd been a long time since I've read it by Sally Miller Gerhardt. It came out in 1978 by one of the earliest feminist lesbian publishers, Persephone Press. And that they did these t-shirts, Persephone Press, A Lesbian Strategy. They only printed lesbian books. So this feminist classic portrays a futuristic lesbian utopia where women who escaped to the hills away from men's violence and repression have discovered who they could be and the powers that they have within themselves and among each other, as well as with nature. And this is part of the vision of Wonderground Lesbian Archive Library, that who we are as lesbians when we know how to cherish our own creativities, memories, herstory, and power. Wonderground embraces the creativity, power, and insight that women, and specifically lesbians, can experience when we gather together in our own created spaces with open hearts and women-focused energies. And actually the name works for people who don't know anything about the book. They're like, Wonderground. Oh, that's kind of a cool name. I'll wander around and around. Yeah. So the other thing I want to tell you, in terms of the importance of language, this goes back to my feminist lesbian days, where we, working against patriarchy and trying to rename ourselves. And so Wonderground, I'm the instigator lesbrarian, which in capitalist speak is the executive director. Groundkeepers are our volunteers. Task circles are what we have named our committees. The Amazon Steward Council is the board of directors. So when I report to the state, I have to tell them who our board of directors is. It's Amazon Steward Council. So stewards are the members of the council. The convener is the chair of the board. The money minder is the treasurer, and the scribe archivist is the secretary. So that's how we've renamed things as part of our organization. Kind of helps us to remember who we are, where we're going, what we're about, and adds a freshness to it. Groundkeepers are vital to the work that we do. We run on volunteer energy. Nobody gets paid. Every now and then there might be stipend available from a grant or something, but mostly we run on volunteers. And intergenerational. We have a lot on, actually a lot of young lesbians and older lesbians and a few in the middle. But this is a quote from one of our groundkeepers. I am a recent university graduate from Southern Rhode Island, URI. I love volunteering at Wonderground because it fosters a deep sense of community and belonging. In a time when queer culture is portrayed as so mainstream and corporate, it is refreshing and inspiring to see cultural artifacts made by lesbians in the past. I'm also very thankful for the opportunity to take part in preserving important cultural history and making it accessible to generations to come. And these are just some of our many groundkeepers. Wonderground is also lesbian focused. All things lesbian, everything lesbian. We do have a couple of LGBTQ resources, mostly things that are anthologies or herstories that have a significant amount of lesbian material in them. But mostly everything that we have is lesbians. And you can see we've got books and t-shirts and buttons and all kinds of cards and all sorts of paraphernalia. Something is hitting the spike. Let me put this here. All right. We also specialize in the New England region, mostly 1950 to 2000. Why, you ask? Well, partly because that was mostly what my collection was in terms of the years, and 1950-ish on that side and 2000-ish on that side. But the council decided that in order to really do a good job and to be sure that we have the resources, the funding, the capacity, the energy to really make a good collection, we decided to keep it from 1950 to 2000. And we are, even though we have a lot of international and national items in the collection, we mostly are focusing on the New England region in terms of materials that we're trying to collect in terms of photos, posters, cards, diaries, individual personal memorabilia, journal, jewelry, those kinds of items. So as the archive grows and when it's past my time, if others come along and say, well, yeah, let's do something else, let's make it bigger, then okay. But for right now, this is where we are because it's what we have the capacity to handle. And then I get these questions. Are you an archive? Are you a library? I don't get it. What are you doing? So we're doing all of those things. In terms of an archive, library, museum, and in terms of an archive, we collect many items, generally like papers, letters, diaries, files, photos, and so on that have been left to us by lesbian individuals or organizations. We're a library in that we have lots of books and periodicals, music, audio, visuals. However, we do not circulate everything just you're welcome to come and hang out at the table and just sit and read for as long as you want. So we had a group come this past weekend and a young woman sat in the corner on the floor with a book. She read the whole book, sitting in the corner for 2 hours. She was there. And then as a museum, because we have lots of paraphernalia. So books, buttons, cards, art pieces, jewelry, lesbian-made handcrafts, trinkets, vests, some clothing, hats, mugs, ceramics, all kinds of things that we have. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So preservation, this is a peek into some of the things that we carry. This is a sheet of bumper stickers for those who are into action. You know, you'd take the sticker off and you'd stick it in the bathroom. Put it on the, wherever, the bank teller's machine or any place where we were, put it in the bus stop, whatever. That's what those bumper stickers were for. On our website, you will see all the other kinds of things that we collect. Books, periodicals, music, I've mentioned a lot of this, but when you go to our website, what's going on here? It's hitting against my stuff, that's why. Let me get rid of this. That's better. So these are the different areas you can go into, and we're trying to get as much in the catalog on the website so that it's accessible to anybody who wants to see anything that we have. So as I mentioned, books, hundreds and thousands. We have 3,000 plus books and counting. That's just the stuff that's already been cataloged. We have stuff in boxes that still needs to be cataloged. We do have what I call a special collection, which is women in print. We highlight the women, all the publishers from women in print. So when you come into the archive, we actually have the books organized by publisher, and then within the publisher by author. So you could go in, you could see this is what Naiad did, this is what Firebrand did, so you get a sense of what that press was about, what their focus is, why it was important for them to do what they were doing. Right now, those books occupy about 5 bookcases, which is about, I don't know, 30 shelves of books that we have that are just women in print books. We have an MLIS intern from Simmons who's right now writing about little abstracts about each of those presses. So when you can come in, and I have this binder that's sitting on the chair has a first draft of that, so you can read about Firebrand, you can read about Naiad, you can get it more familiar with the press. And then the rest of the cases have books that are by commercial publishers, and those are actually organized by topic. We also have a really sizable collection of journals, newsletters, and magazines. Again, we have they're all in the catalog, and we currently have an intern who is spending a lot of time adding context and description and more detail about each of those periodicals so that you can get a better sense of what's in them, what we have. We also have audiovisual materials, records, CDs. We received last year and a half ago a donation from Pam Smith, who was the DJ for Amazon Radio in Bridgeport, Connecticut. She did it for 25 years and she doesn't do it anymore, and she wanted to get rid of her collection. So Wanda Ground is the proud owner of the Amazon Radio collection of some 3,000 CDs and albums. Needless to say, we're still cataloging them. It's going to take us a while. And then many of the DVDs were donated to us from OLOC, which is Old Lesbian Organizing for Change. They used to do a lending library and now they don't. And so they just gave everything to us. And then, of course, there's t-shirts and buttons and bumper stickers. I did bring one of our boxes of buttons up here. You can peruse through that, and you can also see that there's some t-shirts that I brought along too. We also have all kinds of cards and posters and so on and so forth, along with those cards and posters and artwork. The mermaids is the one I was telling you. It's our newest acquisition. The mermaids over there. See them? By Sudi Rakuzen. It's like 4 feet by 6 feet. It is, the colors are unbelievable. So if you ever have a chance to come visit us, you walk in and that's the first thing you see. And then we also have things like jewelry, ceramics, photos, personal papers, all of those kinds of things. We also received a significant donation from a woodworker, a lesbian woodworker, craftswoman, Kathy Lewis, who had done a lot of jewelry in wood. She was a woodworker, so she did these tiny little pieces. Some of them are in this thing up here, so in the jewelry case. So we have, so we're coming along. So why do we collect? Why do we preserve? So why did I do this? Like most of it is just because I like it. I knew that they were stories connected to my life. I instinctively knew that they were special and could be of great importance, if not just to me, but possibly to others. So in addition to these relics, I also have my own personal papers and photos and so on that still need to come into the archive that are not yet there. They helped me to know who I am. They helped me to come out, and they connected me and my learning to other lesbians in the community. I'm not the only one. Lesbian archives remind us that we are relevant, we are here, we exist, and we have always existed. We have a long history with many accomplishments, and our lives do matter. Again, it is about the power of naming. We get to define ourselves. Lesbian archives give first-person voice, visibility, and story. These reference points provide us with the capacity to see who we are, rather than being defined by others. We can come to understand more fully who we are as lesbians when we know and cherish the breadth and depth of our own creativities, memories, herstory, and power. Lesbian archives contain a great abundance of lesbian experiences, lives, creativities, and visions, hopes, joys, heartbreaks, activisms, arguments and disagreements, sexual experiences, and politics, and so much more. Lesbian archives are essential, especially as lesbians become less visible. Lesbian culture and women's history is systemically being erased under the current administration and by others as we witness the removal of historical markers from national parks, books and resources from national museums and libraries, and the persistence of banning books from schools and libraries. Archives and libraries and humanities in general are being defunded. Across the country, we are witnessing a political climate that threatens nonprofits, restricts access to histories, and seeks to silence or erase the very stories that have sustained us and our communities for generations. The simple act of preserving and sharing lesbian and women's lives is, once again, political. For those of you who have ever spent any time in the lesbian archival materials, there is something quite compelling, pleasurable, and comfortable about encountering lesbian lives when they are experienced in archival riches. But there are some challenges. When I first started contemplating this, I was like, nobody's going to want this. I've been proven wrong more than once. But some of the challenges that we face is to encourage older lesbians that their lives are of interest and value. I cannot tell you how many people have said to me, you don't want my stuff. I'm nobody. I'm not famous. I didn't do anything. I'm like, actually, you're exactly who I want to have in the archive. Their lived experiences encourage lesbians to recognize that they have something to share and that their experiences are valuable. They don't have to be famous to be remembered. We hope that they will explore their memorabilia, share memories, and contribute artifacts to the archive. We also collect lesbian personal stories. We want to collect them before they're lost. Think of the time frame 1950 to 2000. Our herstory is dying, literally. Right now, we experience some urgency as we realize that many lesbians who had lived experience in those heydays of the 50s to the 1990s are aging, they're losing their memories, and we want to collect their stories and memories before they pass away. I've also talked to many lesbians who, because they were afraid, they didn't want to come out, they didn't want anybody to know who they are, they wanted to stay in the closet, they didn't want to out other people, they have burned, thrown away, or otherwise destroyed their stuff. Every time I hear a story like that, it totally breaks my heart. So that's a challenge for us, is to not only convince lesbians that their stories are important, regardless of how and where they lived and what they did, because we want to create a fabric. We want to create a whole story. It's not just a community, it's communities, all right, from very many perspectives. And so one of the things that we've created for those of you who have read Wanderground, I think there's a couple here, she talks about the vessels of memory. And so I want to read you this quote from Wanderground, the book, because at Wanderground, we are encouraging lesbians to save their stuff. And some aren't ready to give it up yet. I get it. That's fine. Put it in a box. Put a label on it that says this goes to Wanderground or whatever lesbian archive is mostly interesting to you, but we call it memory vessels. Create your memory vessel. And even if you're not in that time period now, and like I said, there's other lesbian archives, all of you in this room, start creating your memory vessel, okay? Even if it's not stuff you want to keep because your stories are important, your photos, your diaries, your calendars, your papers, your whatever. Her experience as she had known it had been added to the vessels of memory kept within the person of every hill woman, lest we forget where we came from. From the countless seemingly disconnected episodes, the women had pieced together a larger picture so that they had some sense of what happened during those days. Over the years, as women joined them, the memory vessels had been added to. More and more stories, more and more horrors, and sometimes a narrative that brought with it some hope or humor. As a woman shared, she became part of their history. So we're all part of it. And I encourage you all to hold on to your stories and tell them and save the stuff that is there. One of my favorite things, it's not up here, but it might have been on an earlier slide. There was somebody gave me a ticket, a little red ticket, and it said, "One admitted lesbian." And apparently this was a dance that somebody had put together. And so when you went into the dance, you got a ticket. You know, when you entered, you got a ticket that said you were one admitted lesbian that entered that thing. So those are little quirky little things that are just, fun. Maybe it's a matchbook from a bar you went to. Maybe it's a menu from your favorite lesbian restaurant. Maybe it's, could be anything. All of that stuff builds a full story of who we are and what we're about. So I do want to talk a little bit about the promotion of community that comes through archives. The question that the topic of this I have to look this up. The topic of this talk is promoting lesbian herstory through community-based archiving. So I do want to talk a little bit about community-based archiving because that's really important. Why is it important? First of all, because we're in the community. We provide access to our herstories. We reflect the community's experience in herstory. And as I mentioned before, I prefer the term communities rather than the lesbian community, because there's this group and that group and the other group and the other. And sometimes an individual could be in many groups, play softball, go to the political rallies, whatever. But sometimes, or go to the bar scene, whatever. But sometimes, so there's a lot of intersections in those groups. Also, we are independent from institutional requirements. We don't have to do what the university tells us. They tell you to get rid of DEI. I say, no, we're all about DEI. Okay. So we don't have to, we can control our own funding and where we get it from. We can maintain our focus and our mission. And we're accessible to anyone, both on site and via our website and via other ways. And also when I talk about accessibility, we try to make sure that we're in a space that is wheelchair accessible, that has things that are, we don't have good signage yet, but someday we'll have good signage that's actually visible that you can see. When we do Zooms, we always do them with closed captionings. So we try to make things as broadly accessible as we can. As a community-based organization, we are committed to openness and visibility. We're open to people, anybody who wants to come. You can come in and actually see stuff. It's not hidden. Like many university-based archives these days, you have to go and order it, look through the catalog. You don't know where to get it. You have to wait 3 days for it to show up, whatever it is. But when you walk into Wonderground, you can see it, touch it, feel it, hang on to it. Well, not hang on to it, don't take it. In these uncertain times, it's more important than ever for lesbians in our community to be visible, out, and proud. And Wonderground provides both spaces and events for anyone interested in feeling, understanding, and learning more about lesbian cultures and activisms. And we say yes to lesbian visibility. I do have to say one caveat with that. We've had some kids coming into the building where we're not our space, but that have been destroying the upstairs bathroom, which means it leaks into our space. So, but we're working with the building manager to get that taken care of. But we also don't advertise our address. If you want to come and we'll tell you the address, and mostly that's for our protection at this point. There's too many bad actors out there in the world and we don't want to encourage that. So that is the one caveat that we have. But as you can see, you walk in and you can see stuff, all kinds of stuff. Other places where we're visible, in addition to the space on the website, we've been doing, prior to 2024, when we had our space, we really relied on pop-up events. We would go to various places, community centers, do talks. And because we work in the New England region, support the New England region, we really want to be visible because it's not easy to get to Cranston, Rhode Island if you're up in Upper Maine or wherever. So we do some things, blended activities on Zoom. We do Zoom presentations, but recently we just had a blended Zoom where we had people on site and people on Zoom at the same time. It's kind of like this today. It was pretty cool. It's the first time we ever tried it. When we do guest speakers like this, we do presentations at various organizations. And we're trying to get more folks to write blog notes about our stuff in the archive so that people can see it and build connections and learn more about what we're doing. We also want to foster community. We want to provide access to the mission, but to the materials, but part of our mission is to offer community gathering spaces in order to preserve the vibrant past of local lesbians, encourage present-day learning and discovery, and cultivate a future of thriving lesbian communities. We are beginning to have more programming events around items in the archive. And for those visiting Wonderground or participating in our events or displays, older lesbians experience a walk down memory lane, experience nostalgia, and reignite memories. And some of them even say, I never knew that existed, in their days of coming out. Younger individuals are delighted to be in a space that affirms and acknowledges them and also offers answers to their many curiosities of who we are, what did older lesbians do back in the day, and they marvel at the broad array of lesbian legacies new to them that they have no familiarity with. And so this is a quote from an attendee in an event. We did a National Coming Out Day, Dykes Out Loud event where lesbians were invited to tell their coming out stories. I attended Wonderground's Dykes Out Loud event on National Coming Out Day and had a fantastic time. I appreciated the diversity in the speakers and stories and performances and loved how the whole room was very engaged. The most impactful part of the event for me was the feeling of community. I had been sitting in the back by myself, and after everything was done, one of the guest speakers came up to me and asked how I felt about the event. I'm used to feeling invisible, so for her to come and talk to me really made me feel seen and like I was an important part of a community. The inclusive environment fostered by Wonderground at their events is unlike any other LGBTQIA+ event I've attended. So getting close to the end here, we'll talk about lesbian herstory. Lesbian archives illustrate that all diversities of our lives and experiences lived as lesbians by lesbians in multifaceted communities across decades. We provide access to a wide range of words, music, art, politics, sexuality, struggle, creativity, and so on, expressed in multiple ways. These experiences not only include the work of organizations and creators, but also in the collections of individuals' papers, diaries, photos, and other memorabilia. In many cases, archivists and archives follow the footsteps of those lesbian cultural workers before us. With limited resources, little or no pay, and with determined passion and commitment, we carry lesbian herstory forward, make connections and interconnections, and create social documentation from our private lives. We continue to gather materials before they and we disappear for good. It's an honor to care for lesbian lives and communities in this way. We stand as a living, breathing answer to those who would want lesbians to disappear for good. These are not artifacts. They are proof that we have always been here, that we created, organized, loved, and built community, even when the world told us not to. Now we must ensure that these stories are not lost. So I mentioned the ecosystem of the women in print movement. I hear a cry of despair from lesbians, especially of my generation, but even younger lesbians as well. What happened to our communities? What happened to all the places, the bookstores, the festivals, the bars, the community centers, the dances we used to count on for community, connectedness, and happiness and sustenance? Since roughly about the year early 2000s, those spaces have all but disappeared, many of them, for complex and contested reasons. The result has been the erasure of lesbian cultures. Our connections to communities of other lesbians have been lost, at least significantly decreased. We are the disappearing L, and lesbians of all generations miss those spaces and realize how vital they have been to us. We still need them. Additionally, as lesbians from that era die off, their vital resources and memorability will likely vanish, and it's essential to collect them now as they provide connection to our past and continue to be relevant to lesbians in the future. Wonderground helps us to remember those spaces, hold them in our collective consciousness, and perhaps encourage revitalization in the new era. So how can you support Wonderground? Visit us, come and see, bring your friends, bring your groups. Become a groundkeeper. We have lots of opportunities and lots of things if you're interested in this or that. We can come up with something. Tell your friends, increase our visibility. We have a thing called the Regional Scouts. We have a little scout badge over there. It's on the board over there. You'll see a little circle that says Wonderground. Those are our scout badges. So basically, because we're in New England region, if you know of other places in New England, people, organizations, centers that we should be connected with, let us know about them. We'll call you a scout. Create and donate your memory vessel when it's time, and help us with fundraising. Make a donation. Money's always good. Helps keep the lights on. And then in closing, I just want to, this quote by Audre Lorde, hangs in my office. I read it almost every day. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. In the early days of developing Wonderground, a young volunteer stood wide-eyed with hundreds of books scattered around the room. I've never seen so many lesbian books in one space. She's not alone. It's amazing. People come in and their minds blown. In that moment, she could see herself reflected, affirmed, and rooted in a lineage that too often goes unseen, unprotected, or erased. Wonderground makes it possible to see a reflection of yourself in a larger context, whatever your interest is. In times like these, lesbian archives, indeed all archives, are not passive. They are acts of defiance. They are declarations. We were here. We are here. We will not disappear. Thank you very much.
So we are very lucky that Ned is willing to take some questions for us. Let me know how you want us to deal with the mic. Oh.
Are there any
Very
questions on Zoom?
athletic.
I'm going to get off
We
my
do
feet.
actually have a question in the Zoom already.
I'm gonna actually open up the space if that's okay,
Sure.
and then we'll move on there. So I was wondering if you could start by, you said to our class when you visited earlier that no one who does any activism ever does it alone. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what collectivity has meant to you personally. And maybe if there's anything that you would like to offer to those of us who are trying to survive this political moment about collectivity and what it could mean to our movement.
Okay. First of all, I want to say collectivity is not easy. It takes work. You have to learn how to communicate and share ideas and be willing to stand off your turf a little bit in order to let somebody else have their turf, So, but I have worked I worked at Bloodroot for nearly 10 years, and that was run by a collective. So I saw how they operated, and everyone who came into this space was part of the family, if you will. Although not my family, but family. I don't like saying part of our family because families are so problematic for many people. So maybe that's not the best analogy, but a way of working together, sharing ideas, sharing the work, taking turns, sharing the work. Like maybe you're really good at working the numbers and maybe somebody else needs to learn how to work the numbers, Somebody else is really good at sending emails. Well, maybe somebody else should learn how to send, preach one, teach one, each one, teach one, I think is the phrase that was sometimes used so that you are sharing skills with each other and not holding on to your little thing and not letting anybody else involved in it. Like, being able to step up as a leader or step back, not always being the person who's the center of the conversation. Amazon Bookstore was a collective also. Well, actually, we're a cooperative workers union or something, I don't know. Basically meant nothing except that, again, sharing experiences, sharing resources, sharing the work, making sure everybody was involved in some way or another. So it's about being heard, it's about being seen and visible, communication, willingness to stand up and get things done. I think that's where I'm going to go with that.
Great.
But you really cannot do it alone. No movement, movement means people, a lot of people. It's, otherwise it's a solitary act, which, may or may not get you anywhere, but it's that building of creative consciousness that's really important.
So why don't we hear it over the Zoom?
Okay. Do you ever seek out other lesbian archives around the US for information or resources?
Absolutely. That's how Wanderground got started. I did a little market research locally, like, is anybody interested? And yeah, people were interested. But then I knew in full disclosure, which I did not disclose yet, I am not an archivist. I am not a librarian. I've not been professionally trained that way. I just have hung out with a lot of librarians and booksellers over the years. So a lot of knowledge I've just kind of accumulated over time, but I knew that in order for Wanderground to succeed, I would have to reach out to other archives. So I spoke with Lesbian Herstory Archives in New York. I spoke with June Mazer Archive in West Hollywood. Angela and I have become very good friends and colleagues, and we share information all the time. Lesbian Archive in the Bay Area, Bay Area and Lesbian Archives, and Southern feminist, lesbian, radical feminist, I don't know, they've got 45 words in their name, but those are the gist of them. So we've worked with librarians, archivists from around the country. And in fact, I initiated us meeting every 6 months or so just to kind of share ideas, sort of thinking about the Feminist Bookstore Network, but that we would be an archivist network. But everybody's gotten too busy and we haven't done it for a while, but I'm hoping to reinstill that. But yeah, we do share, and every now and then it'll be like, I have 20 copies of this book. You need some? So there has been some sharing of resources and not money, but, like physical items that we've swapped back and forth. And I've also been in contact with locally, Brown, Providence Public Library, and several other libraries that we've done some work with. The Queer Archives, they've just changed their name. Queer Archive Boston. I don't remember the name, but up in Boston, there's an archive that we've been doing some work with. So we do share a lot of, hey, how do you do this?
All right, friends. Yes.
Wait, I gotta. Yeah, I did.
We'll see who the jocks are in this room.
We're gonna rock on with it.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Well, one, I wanted to say thank you so much. I'm grateful for you coming and sharing your story and starting this project and collecting your items. It sounds like an amazing collection. And I think it's really interesting how you chose to categorize all the books. That stood out to me. And then I was curious if you work with other gender identities that are creating archives, maybe from like 2000 on, or if there's like other groups doing this.
There are other groups doing that. The archive I mentioned in Boston, I think they started off with Boston materials, but I think they have a lot of other stuff too, but they're LGBTQ. There's also a sexual minorities archive in Western Mass. I haven't really worked with them because I understand they're having some difficulties, so I haven't really been in touch with them yet. The Providence Public Library has an LGBTQ, but they do only Rhode Island. So I've worked with them. And like I mentioned, Brown, I've been in touch with them a bit. So, and like I said, eventually it may go past 2000, but right now that's, I'm just trying to focus on capturing the stories we can capture at this point. So, and as I mentioned, we're remaining focused on lesbian right now, but there are lots of other archives. And actually, do I have it with me? I might have left it back at the shop. On our website, under resources or someplace up there, there is a list of, I've created a list of lesbian and LGBTQ and feminist libraries across the country.
Wow.
And so, and it's a list of like, I don't know, 50 different archives with different visions. And there's even a couple of international ones on there.
Wow,
So
that's really cool.
if you, someplace on the website under resources, there is a listing of all the lesbian Herstory archives around the country, as well as a bunch of LGBTQ.
Wow, thank you. And really, I wanted to ask about the musical women's retreat, that shirt that you have up here.
Oh, yeah.
Connecticut, I was wondering if you had any fun story from that event.
Absolutely, I do. So it started off being called the New England Women's Musical Retreat. Eventually, they changed the name to the Northeast Women's Music Retreat because they did it in New England, but then they ran out of they went into New York, and so then they're like, okay, now we're really the Northeast. So, but it was a festival that went on for 3-4 days. They had a day stage, which was mostly lesbians or women musicians. None of them were all lesbians. A lot of them were, just women, basically. Holly Neer said something really funny a couple of years ago. She said, yeah, we always call it women's music, but we know it was 98% lesbian. So, but anyway, the festival had a day stage, which was usually single acts or small bands or new and up and coming musicians who hadn't really gotten any notoriety yet. I played on the day stage one time, which was kind of fun. It poured rain on me. Everybody ran away, so nobody heard my music.
Aw.
But then they would have a night stage too, and then during the day they'd have a crafts area. So a lot of like crafty stuff I picked up at various festivals along the way. A lot of the t-shirts and those kinds of things I picked up at the crafts section. And then they would have workshops and whatever. And often they were in the woods in the middle of nowhere, so you could run around with barely anything on. Some people would wear a little strap or whatever, but, sunburned boobies and all the rest of it. It was, I think the best thing I ever saw was there's a musician named Linda Tillery, African-American woman, does a lot of jazz and rhythm and blues and a lot of different kinds of music. A lot of spiritual, not spiritual really, but cultural African type music. And then there's another musician whose name was Rhiannon. She was totally a jazz singer. And so, and at all of the festivals, they always had ASL interpreters. Always, always, always. There was always somebody on the stage who was doing ASL. Well, Linda Tillery was on stage singing her heart out, interpreters going. Well, then, do you know the term scat? She was singing scat. She was doing all that. Well, Rhiannon comes out from the back of the stage and starts competing with her with the scat. So the two of them are back and forth. Meanwhile, the sign language interpreter, she's got Linda on one hand and Rihanna on the other hand. And she's going like this. And finally, the two of them figured out what she was doing. And so they started messing with her. So it was just, everybody was like screaming and carrying on. It was the most fabulous thing I'd ever seen at a festival. But, a lot of different bands, a lot of different types of music, a lot of gals, they would have, it was just phenomenal. There was actually one here in 1987 on the campus of URI in Kingston in 1987. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry, did you guys
We've gone
camp out?
backward in terms of access in our movement?
Say it again.
Do you think we've gone backwards in terms of
Yes.
access?
Yes. Yes. I mean, when I was doing all the work that I've ever done, we always talked about access. Could you get in there by a wheelchair? And that was a challenge for the festivals. We had to build rugs, put rugs down, and really look at the land, because it was, Boy Scout land on the middle of the woods, so we had to really figure out how to make those places accessible. So they would create certain kinds of showers, they would put up tents and everything. So they did the best they could to make it as wheelchair accessible. Always ASL. Very often, not always, but stuff for vision and people who are having visual impairments or whatever, to be able to see, like if it was Braille or something was dictated so that you could see, you could have access to the program if you couldn't read it, large print or whatever. There was a lot of things around scent in terms of, this is a scent-free environment. So you could not wear your smelly shampoos and soaps and perfumes and whatever, because it really did impact people environmentally. So there was always an awareness of that. Tried to have the food options in terms of, making sure that we were addressing the vegetarians and then the vegans, and that, so, and actually some of that food was cheaper anyway. So you got a vegetarian meal whether you wanted it or not. So, breakfast was granola and yogurt and peanut butter, every day, and a banana, so you got used to that after a while. So I'll say to somebody, is that space accessible? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, then I can't do it there. Every time I do an event, I want to make sure that it's accessible. Otherwise, I'm not doing it. There's stairs we have to go up. If there's, whatever it is. And when I mean accessible, I also don't even just mean physically accessible. Is it a neighborhood that people of color feel comfortable going into? Is it a situation where folks who don't have a lot, the other thing we did was a lot of, what'd you call it? Pay what you can, sliding scale, all right? And the complaint often was that those who really could afford it didn't pay for it. And meanwhile, those who didn't have a whole lot of money were doing whatever they could to pay whatever, even if I'll give you $3, or work exchange, or there's always work exchange offered so that you could work instead of paying, whatever the equivalent was. They did that, so payment was also a really big deal. Were the chairs sturdy enough? For us big gals, we need a little more security under us. So for the longest time, you could buy small, medium, or large t-shirts. Seriously? So then they finally got wise and said, okay, 2X, 3X, 4X, 5X, 6X. Guess who bought all the 6X shirts? The skinny little ones who were using them as night shirts so that the big girls couldn't get the shirt. It's like craziness. So having an awareness of your needs and other needs and when you were being appropriating a space and when you were, I would say all of that was very much alive in the communities in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and not so much anymore. So I think, if you want a place of activism, that's the kind of thing that is a good place to think about.
There are more in the.
Sure.
I mean, you could pass it there.
I feel really bad. I don't know if I can throw as good as I can catch.
Y'all, I'm not shy. I'll talk about this for days.
Do I have to talk into the top of it? Okay, weird.
I know.
I was just wondering if you have any favorite pieces or any like thing that you think is like super interesting or something you think is super cool that you have in your archive.
Just like asking me about my firstborn child. There's a lot of different things I like for a lot of different reasons. Like I mentioned the ticket, the one admitted lesbian. I just think that is so creative and cool. So here's another sort of funny story. When I was working at Amazon, one day this cookie cutter showed up. It was in the shape of a goddess. It was a wire cookie. It was a stainless steel cookie cutter in the shape of the Willendorf. I was like, I gotta have that. And it had a little card on it of who the artisan was, and where she was located. And for some reason, a lot of things I don't know where they came from anymore because I threw away the cards, which is dumb. But in this case, I actually held on to the card. So this is in Minneapolis in the 90s. I moved to Rhode Island, whatever. And I decided I'm going to make these cookies. And I pull out the cookie cutter and I look at the name on the card. Thea Ernest. She is now a good friend of mine. So 30 years later, I have a cookie cutter, which back when she was a welder, which she's not anymore. But it's just like, how cool is that? It's the same 30 dikes all done with mirrors. So I think the mermaids that I pointed out before, Sudi Rakusan's artwork, I just love. She does a lot of black and white drawings. Recently, we just did a coloring event, so we just sat around and colored Sudi Rakusan pictures. The books, just a lot of them. The publishers it's hard for me to pick out any one thing. Hell no. But because as a bookseller, you have to become familiar with all that stuff. So, somebody say, do you have so-and-so? I'd say, oh yeah, fourth shelf down, third shelf down on the right, it's red, things like that. But I know I'm familiar enough with them, not as much anymore, but I could at least, if I wanted to find something, I could go find it. And that's still true now. But because I had it in my house in a certain way so I could find it, and now I've rearranged it all. And so I have to actually go to the catalog to figure out where it is because I've lost track of where it is. But, I could, for many years and still, I can tell you at least what's in it. Or if I'm looking for something, I know where to go to look, even if I haven't read the whole book. There's lots of books. And actually, I don't read so much anymore. I'm a nonfiction reader. I get too lost in fiction, so I can't really read it that much. But yeah, I like the philosophy and the ethics and the periodicals. Lesbian Connection, I love. Oh, a favorite child. There was a newsletter that was in New Haven, Connecticut from about 1982-ish to about 2002-ish. 1993, I'm sorry. 1982 to 1993. Years escape me. It was called The Newsletter, A Lesbian Position. And the editors were very clear. It is not the lesbian position, it is a lesbian position. Came out monthly. It was legal size paper, printed on, folded in half. And it had book reviews, letters, ads, articles written by lesbians in the community, totally run by volunteers, came out once a month, little drawings that people had done, had the softball team schedule in it, you know, special events, concerts, so on and so forth. It was the place to find out what was going on in the Connecticut area during those years. And I look at it now and it's like, if you ever want to do the story or the herstory of a community, read that from cover to cover, all issues. You'll get to see what was being talked about, who was angry at who was doing this, what great things were happening, where you could go to get. It's just a phenomenal publication that shows you how a community can come alive when it's being shared with others in the community. It's just, and Lesbian Connection is a lot like that too, which is still in print today. So, you want me to tell a story of Lesbian Connection?
Yeah, please do.
I think I have one in here. I don't have one in here. All right, so Lesbian Connection was started in 1977. Volunteers. I think people might get paid now, I don't know, but initially it was volunteers. And it was printed on 8.5 by 11 paper. And for some reason, each page was a different color. So they ran it off, however it is they ran it off. And so they'd have these coalition parties, right? So, you know, ding, 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 ding. Get them all piled up, staple them on the ends. Okay, 8.5 folded on 3 staples on the end. But that wasn't good enough. We're talking about 1977 when we're all still in the closet. You didn't want anybody knowing that you were getting a publication called The Lesbian Connection, right? So what'd they do? They fold it in half. Okay, so you have 8.5 by 11 folded in half. So it's now what, 5 by 7 or whatever that is. And they staple it. I swear to God, that had probably 25 staples in it. Come in the mail, it'd be all tight as, it would take you 15 minutes to get into that thing and have bloody fingers when you were done. You know, because you were desperate to get in there. And Lesbian Connection, letter L, letter C, LC, so they called it LC Publishing, E-L-S-I-E, the girl's name, Elsie Publishing, with a P.O. box. Your name and your address and a stamp. And that was all that was on the outside. And it was stapled. They've gotten a lot better now. It's now like this size and it's colorful and they stick it in an envelope and mail it to you. It's a lot saner now, but anyway. Yeah. 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 Well, because you didn't want to be outed, you know, and they were very careful to protect people's privacy. They also had another thing that was called contact dikes. So if you were traveling anywhere in the US or the Canada or the world, and you were going into a community, you know, you were going into Rochester, New York, and you wanted to find out, you could call a contact dyke or mail her and say, I'm coming to town, tell me where I should go. And they would tell you all. So they still do that. And now they've started running obituaries, which is pretty phenomenal for somebody like me to say, oh, she's gone. But it's still, since 1977, it still comes out bi-monthly now. It's, you know, and it's free to lesbians worldwide. So, are we almost done? Oh, fun. Other questions?
If we are not in the position to give money, sorry, it's really small and I should have brought my reading glasses. If we're not in the position to give money, are there other helpful things that someone outside the community can do to support Wanderground while not interfering with it being a safe space?
Yeah, you can tell people about us so that they can get on our mailing list. We do try to do a monthly newsletter now so that people can see what's in the archive and what's happening. Encourage other people to give us money. Yeah. But mostly, you know, we just want to expand our reach and get more people involved. And so get on the mailing list and tell your friends to get on the mailing list. We are having a fundraising concert in Western Mass in April, the end of Lesbian Visibility Week. I've got some flyers up here on the table if you want to take a field trip out to Western Mass. It's featuring lesbian musicians from around New England. And then, you know, if we do have a few volunteer things that are remote, it's getting harder to figure that out, but, you know, we can do some things like, especially if she sees something or he sees something in the archive that is really interesting and they want to do a little research on it and write an article about it, That would be really cool. That would be really a lot of fun. Or do a review of a book or something like that that's out of the archive, or music or something.
There's one more in here. Does having to hide the location of the archive affect the outreach you have?
I would say not, actually. I've been pretty surprised. Partly, the other thing about not advertising the address is because we actually don't have regular open hours right now. So, we have work days when our groundkeepers come, and several of them will work on projects. And at the same time, we've had several groups contact us and say, we want to come and see. And we're like, set up a date, and they come and see. And then when they tell us they're coming, we give them the address then, obviously, because we want them to come see us. And that's true for you. If you want to come see us, we're in Cranston, down a main thoroughfare. Let us know and we'll let you know the address. I mean, right now it was just a decision that when we first got in there, the door didn't have a peephole in it. And we were like, if somebody knocks, I don't know who's on the other side of the door. So we put a peephole in, we did actually have some guy walk in one time and want to sell us something. I was like, so now I keep the door locked. Don't want, especially if I'm there by myself, that's the other thing, we don't, but yeah, people have been really excited. I mean, we're obviously visible on the website. And so, there's lots of ways people can get connected to us, and they join our mailing list, and we do gigs like this. And we've done, the Providence Flea had a Pride Flea a couple of years that was indoors. So we went to that. So lots of people found out about us. So we've got these brochures and bumper stickers and pencils are for you to take. So please just give them to your friends, or pencils if you're going to the archive. That's what that is. Anything else? Anyone else?
I'm not throwing it at somebody that is.
So you've discussed how before you had this separate sphere to create the Wandergram, put all your your elaborate collection and everything there. You used to store stuff in your house, and it was kind of everywhere. You couldn't really contain it to a room and anything. Did you have any colleagues or friends who were doing similar things? I mean, everybody has stuff here and there, but you had this elaborate 45+ year collection. Was anybody else doing that, or were you kind of the only one?
I have not yet met anybody who has done that. Call me pack rat. But I have a friend who I have a conversation with. She takes a lot of photos. Every event she ever goes to, she takes photos. Photos. So she's got albums of photos. And I said, those should all come to Wanderground. She's one of the people that I have to convince that her stuff is worth something. We have conversation. She goes, nobody cares about it. Why would you want my stuff? I mean, we've had this conversation so many times, it's boring. So, she's the only person I know who has something at that extent. A lot of lesbians I know have already donated their stuff to other libraries prior to us. So there's stuff at Sophia Smith up at Smith College. There's stuff at, what's the one in Boston? Radcliffe, what's it called? Schlesinger Library. A lot of people have already sent their stuff off to Lesbian Herstory archives or other little archives all over the country. My thing is, I don't really care where you send your stuff as long as you send it someplace. And I'm also of the opinion that if you don't want to send it to Wanderground, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Because I feel like as long as you've sent it to someplace, we need outposts everywhere. I don't want everything in one place. Because if somebody is going to do whatever bad things they're going to do, you don't want everything in one place. And many archives, and Lauren, I'm sure will speak to this, you have 2 copies. One copy here and one copy there, And so we unfortunately don't have that space yet. I got 2 copies of things, but they're all in the same room at this point. Yeah, well, so, and that's the thing, we're out of space. And so there's this movement to digitize everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. You can digitize stuff, but you know what? There's something about being able to put your hands on Hothead Paisan and read it from cover to cover. That's really different than reading it online. It just is, people can come in and touch stuff and they get really excited about it. So, there's a archivist at Brown who talks about that a lot in terms of the importance of having the material thing. that you can touch. You have a different relationship with it. The other thing that we're trying to do is to collect stories behind the stuff. So it's not just a matter that we have this mug. Who owned that mug? What's the story of that mug? Where did it come from? Why did they bother to keep it? Why did I keep? I could tell you a story about every single one of these t-shirts. So what's the story behind the stuff? And that's the other thing we're trying to collect. We did, if you go to our website, there's in that thing, there's one that's called Exploring the Archives. We got a grant from the Humanities Organization in Rhode Island to have individuals tell stories about the stuff, like why they made it, when they made it, how it was, what their experiences of it were. So we're trying to build stories behind the stuff instead of just having the stuff. Yeah.
And then finally, just going off of that quickly, we know preserving lesbian history matters and that we need these artifacts, but did anybody at the time close to you try to convince you, hey, this doesn't matter? Why do you have all this stuff? You should probably get rid of it, or like try to tear you down? Or did everybody most people leave you alone and support you?
Most people didn't know I was doing it. But I think the biggest trouble for me was I lived in New Haven for 10 years. I collected stuff in New Haven for 10 years. Then I moved to the Twin Cities. Actually, let me back up. I came out in Detroit. I lived in Detroit for 3 years. That's where I was reading the first things I was reading, Rupert Fruit Jungle and so on. Then I moved to New Haven, so Detroit to New Haven, 10 years of stuff. Moved all of that to Minnesota, lived there for 10 years. Moved all of that stuff to Rhode Island. So for me, the biggest problem was moving. My partner is like, really? Like, we have to move this again? Yes, dear, we do. She's a long-suffering, wonderful woman. But nobody ever really told me no. I just did it. And I think I come by it honestly because my parents were pack rats and, I had to clean their house out. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to start Wanderground, because I didn't want any. That's the other thing. If you have it and you think it's important to lesbian archives, put it in a memory vessel and mark what it is and say, send it here, because when your folks come behind you, what is this garbage? I didn't want all my stuff going in a dumpster. I didn't want it going in the garbage. I didn't want it going to tag sales because I knew the significance of it. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that can, but I've been trying to say these are the things that are important and why they're important and save those. It's because the temptation is to get exhausted with it and want to just put it in the dumpster. And that's where we lose stuff. Or the lesbian who didn't want to come out, and so she burned all 10 years of her love letters with her significant other. It's like, oh, you stole my heart.
This type of one or two more questions.
I have one question regarding what would you say are some of your favorite objects or books or any type of item that you collected over the years to build your archive, and also with how the struggles of being a lesbian in certain periods of time, how long would you say it took for you to build from a little area in your house to Wanderground and how it looks today?
45 years. No, I mean, when I was coming out in Detroit, I just had a few books and mostly records. I was into the lesbian music big time. Alex Dobkin and Meg Christian and Chris Williamson and Linda Tillery and who else? I don't know, a bunch of them. Like, I just listened to music because I really resonate with music. And so that's a lot of where my coming out came from, was finding the lesbians who were singing about being lesbian, So I had a bunch of records like that. And then the books that I came to, partly because I was in the business I was in, I had access to stuff that a lot of other people might not have seen. So for example, when I was at Amazon, I was a book buyer. I was in charge of used books. So people would bring in their boxes of used books, and I would have to say, oh, okay, we'll sell this one for $2 and we'll sell that one for $4. Well, what started happening was Mev's pile. Mev's pile. Mev's pile. I'll buy those for $2 each, So a lot of the books from like the early publishers, Persephone and Diana and Daughters, were not ones that I initially bought, but they came to me through the used book bin. And then I started going to used bookstores and finding some of the other things. I think the pulp novels I have was because I had a roommate who left them behind. I was like, yay, So I think that for me, the true treasure has been to really find the early lesbian feminist publisher stuff, whether it's pamphlets or, books that are just sort of like somehow put together by mimeograph. You know what a mimeograph machine is? Yeah, you get Stentner, pamphlets of things, those I think were really those are the ones that I really treasure the most because they're the oldest and they're the most hard to find and they're really unique and really talk about, what lesbians were doing back in those days. I think those are really important to me. The newer stuff, past 2000, Well, partly because I wasn't in the business. I mean, part of it really is a lot of it was because I was doing the business. And so I had exposure. I was a book reviewer. So I'd come home from work and there'd be 4 books on the front porch, that I had to review. And so some of the stuff I just picked up that way. I don't know. Did I answer your question? Okay. Did I answer everybody's question?
Friends, can you join me in expressing our profound appreciation to Mev? Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. You've been great, and I've really enjoyed all your questions.
Yeah, and I also want to take a moment to thank the Gender and Sexuality Center, without whom we simply would not be able to do programming in comfortable spaces. So very, very grateful to them. Yes.
You gotta use the microphone.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to end us on that note. Thank you so much. Feel free to please take a look at all of the wonderful archival material here. Get in touch with Mev. And please remember that you and your stuff, it really does matter. Thank you.
You matter.
Yes.
Take the brochure for the bookmarks and the pencils.
And we have lots of food, so please enjoy. Mev's here a little bit longer, so if you have any individual questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Ellison. It's great. Thank you, Adam. Okay.
Yeah. Stop recording.
Camera's already out, you're good.
But stop recording. Wonderground specifically, I don't know where I said. So it's
Way over, yeah.
yeah. At the,
Yeah.